They say the Skinwalker can take any form, but what if it already took yours? The night was thick with fog as I drove down the winding, deserted road through the heart of New Mexico. It was the kind of night that felt wrong, like something was lurking just beyond the reach of the headlights. I had taken this trip on a whim, desperate for a break from my fast-paced city life. A week away, far from the noise, the hustle, and the constant barrage of messages and emails. But there was something off about this place. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was the kind of unsettling feeling that crawls under your skin and sticks with you. The further I drove, the more isolated I felt. There were no other cars, no houses, no signs of life, just endless stretches of dark, rolling desert and the occasional glimpse of dry, gnarled trees. I kept glancing at my GPS, but the signal was weak. Even the air felt different here, thick, dry, and heavy. I had finally reached the town, if you could even call it that, at about midnight. The place barely had a gas station, a small general store, and a few rundown motels that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. I was the only one checking into the motel, which was a little unsettling, considering it was the only one around for miles. But I wasn't planning to stay long, just a quick rest, and then I'd head out at first light. The old man behind the desk gave me a strange look when I walked in, like he was sizing me up, deciding whether I was the kind of person who should be in this town or not. But he didn't say anything. He just handed me the key to room 3, and I headed down the narrow hallway to the door. The room was basic, barely furnished. The smell of stale air and mothballs hit me as soon as I walked in, but I didn't mind. I was tired, and I just wanted to sleep. I set my bag down on the bed and immediately pulled the thick, dusty curtains aside, hoping to get a glimpse of the night sky, but all I could see was darkness. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and there wasn't a single star in sight. That's when I noticed the sounds. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the more I listened, the more it didn't sound like wind. It was a low, constant rustling noise, as if someone was moving around outside. I shook it off, telling myself it was just an animal, maybe a coyote or a stray dog. But then, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps coming closer to the window. I froze, my heart racing, as I peered through the crack in the curtains. Nothing. I stepped back, my mind racing. Could it have been a person? I hadn't seen anyone in town since I arrived. My curiosity was stronger than my fear, so I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door. The cold hit me immediately, sending a chill down my spine as I stepped onto the cracked pavement. The town was eerily quiet, too quiet. I looked around, but there were no signs of movement, no cars, no people, just shadows stretching long across the empty streets. I glanced back at the motel, making sure the door was securely closed behind me, and then walked toward the source of the sound. It came from the woods. The trees stood like dark sentinels, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers in the dim light. I wasn't sure what drew me toward them. Maybe it was the pull of the mystery, or maybe it was just the kind of reckless curiosity you get when you're far from home. As I got closer, the rustling sound grew louder, but it wasn't the wind, it was something else. Something moving through the underbrush. My breath caught in my throat as I approached the tree line. And then, I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, maybe a shadow, maybe my eyes playing tricks on me. But then it moved again, and I saw it more clearly. A figure, hunched and twisted, standing just beyond the trees. It wasn't a person, though. No, it was something else, something wrong. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine, and for a moment, I couldn't move. The figure stayed motionless, its head tilting in an unnatural way, like it was studying me. My heart was pounding, and all I could think was that I needed to get back to the motel, fast. I turned and started running, not looking back. The sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and far too close for comfort, followed me. The feeling of being watched, hunted, never left me. By the time I got back to my room, I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. But I knew, deep down, that whatever that thing was, it wasn't done with me yet. This story seems to be getting scarier, doesn't it? If you want more stories like this, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. This helps create even more scary for you. The rest of that night was restless. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind against the walls, had me on edge. My mind raced, replaying the image of that thing, whatever it was, staring at me from the edge of the woods. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, waiting, watching. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just an animal, maybe I had imagined it in the darkness, but the doubt gnawed at me, and sleep was a distant dream. The morning came far too soon. The dull gray light that crept through the curtains did little to ease the terror still clinging to me. I had planned to leave first thing, to get the hell out of that place, but something kept me tethered. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't that I wanted to stay. It was like there was something pulling me in, something deeper than curiosity, something that felt like it belonged here, in the vast emptiness of this strange, forgotten town. I grabbed my things and went to the small, run-down cafe down the street. I needed coffee, badly. The place was nearly empty, with only a few locals scattered around, speaking in hushed voices. When I sat down, the waitress, a young woman with dark, tired eyes, took my order. She seemed off. She didn't look at me directly. In fact, she barely looked at me at all, her gaze always drifting to the window. "You're new around here," she said quietly, as she filled my cup. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile, "just passing through." She paused. Her fingers twitched as she set the coffee pot down on the counter, the only sound in the room the slow drip of the machine. "Be careful in the woods," she said, her voice low, barely above a whisper. I blinked, unsure how to respond. I didn't, but before I could finish, she turned and walked away without another word, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. I didn't know what to make of it. Was she warning me, or was it just some strange local superstition? I sipped my coffee, my mind still clouded by the events of the previous night. The feeling of being watched was still heavy on me, suffocating. I could almost feel the eyes on the back of my neck, but when I looked, there was no one there. After finishing my coffee, I decided to walk around the town. I needed to clear my head, to try and make sense of the bizarre experience. The town was quiet, unnervingly so. There was a stillness to everything. The buildings, though old and worn, seemed to have an eerie, lifelike quality to them, as if they were aware of my presence. I passed by a small cemetery on the outskirts of town. The graves were ancient, most of them weathered by time, their inscriptions barely readable. But there was one grave that caught my attention. It was new, freshly dug, the dirt still loose around the edges. The headstone was simple, with no name or date, just a crude symbol etched into the stone. My curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped closer. The symbol looked strange, almost inhuman. It wasn't like anything I had seen before. It was a circle with jagged lines radiating out from the center, like an eye. It made my stomach churn. As I stood there, staring at the grave, I heard a sound behind me. Footsteps. I spun around, but no one was there. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my heart began to pound in my chest. I felt it again, the unmistakable feeling that something was following me, watching me. I turned quickly, heading back toward the main street, but as I walked, something in the corner of my eye caught my attention. A figure, standing at the edge of the trees. I froze. The same figure. It was just as I remembered, twisted, hunched, its head tilted unnaturally, and for a brief, horrifying moment, it was as if the world around me froze. The sound of my own heartbeat drowned out everything else. The figure's eyes, dark, hollow, and filled with something I couldn't quite name, locked onto mine. I didn't think, I just ran. I sprinted back down the street, not stopping until I reached the motel. My breath came in ragged gasps, my legs burning from the effort. I slammed the door behind me, locking it quickly, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I glanced around the room, my heart racing in my chest. There was no sign of the creature, but I knew it was close. I could feel it, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I couldn't explain why, but I had the overwhelming sense that it wasn't just one creature. There was something more to this, something darker, something older. I grabbed my phone, hoping for some sort of signal, but there was nothing, not even a bar of service. That's when I saw it. A shadow, creeping under the door. I held my breath. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps echoed through the silence, growing louder, closer. And then, just like before, everything went still. The footsteps stopped. I waited, heart pounding in my throat, but there was no knock, no sound. But something told me, something deep inside me, that whatever was out there wasn't done with me. It was only just beginning. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong, like the town itself was alive with a dark secret. I spent the rest of that afternoon in my motel room, too terrified to leave, yet too restless to sleep. My eyes kept flicking to the door, half expecting it to open at any moment, but nothing came. The silence was oppressive, like the world outside had been frozen in place. Around dusk, the unease finally drove me to the front desk. The old man was there again, his face even more worn than the day before, his eyes shadowed with something I couldn't place. He didn't acknowledge me as I approached, just stared at the counter in front of him. "Is there anyone else staying here?" I asked hesitantly. My voice felt small, barely breaking through the thick tension in the air. He didn't respond at first, then glanced up at me through narrowed eyes. "You're the only one," he said, his voice gravelly. There was something in his tone, something unspoken, that made my stomach churn. "Is there a reason why?" I pushed, trying to keep my voice steady. The old man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached under the counter, pulled out a faded map of the area, and slid it across to me without a word. His finger traced a line across the map, pointing to a small area marked in red, an area that was deep in the woods, far from the town. "That's where you need to stay away from," he said finally, his voice low. "If you don't, well, you'll be just another story." I stared at him, confusion settling in. "What do you mean? What's out there?" He shook his head, eyes flicking nervously to the window, as though expecting something or someone outside. He opened his mouth, then closed it, like he was trying to decide whether or not to say more. "Just go back to your room," he muttered. "Leave as soon as you can. Trust me." I stood there for a moment longer, the weight of his words sinking in, before I turned and walked back to my room. My mind was racing. What was so dangerous in those woods? And why did the townspeople seem so afraid? I couldn't just let it go. There was something about that map, something about the way the man had reacted that screamed there was a lot more to this place than met the eye. I needed to know what was going on, what had happened here, and I knew, deep down, that there was no way I could leave until I found out. As night fell, I found myself standing at the edge of the woods once again, staring into the thick darkness. The trees loomed like giants, their twisted limbs reaching toward the sky in a grotesque dance. The wind had died down, leaving only the eerie stillness in its wake. I stepped forward, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot the only sound. The air felt colder now, and the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. I could feel it, like invisible eyes tracking my every move, but I pushed the fear aside. I had to find out what was going on. As I walked deeper into the woods, the shadows seemed to close in around me. The trees twisted unnaturally, their bark scarred with strange, ancient symbols I couldn't recognize. It was like I was walking through a place that didn't belong in this world, a place where time had stopped, and reality was beginning to bend. The deeper I went, the more oppressive the air became. My breath came in shallow bursts, and my heartbeat quickened with every step. I should have turned back. I should have listened to the warning, but I didn't. And then I saw it. A clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a massive stone structure, weathered and ancient, covered in moss and vines. It wasn't a building, it was a monument, a forgotten relic of something long lost to history. I couldn't tell what it was exactly, but there was something about it, something about the way it radiated a dark energy that made my skin crawl. As I approached, I noticed the ground around the structure was littered with strange symbols, etched into the dirt, some of them almost glowing faintly in the dim light. It was like some kind of ritual site, or a place for dark ceremonies. And then, I noticed the bodies. They were scattered across the clearing, their remains twisted and mutilated. Some were half buried, others were left out in the open, their eyes wide open in terror, their faces frozen in pain. I felt the bile rise in my throat, and I had to force myself to look away. This wasn't a simple graveyard, this was something far worse. Suddenly, a noise behind me snapped me back to reality. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, close. I spun around, my heart in my throat, but there was no one there. Yet the footsteps continued, and they were coming closer. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath in the frigid night. My pulse raced. I was not alone. I started backing away, my eyes scanning the trees, the shadows, but I couldn't see anything, just darkness closing in around me. And then, I heard it. A voice, a whisper, low and guttural, coming from the trees. "You shouldn't have come here." I froze. The voice was wrong. It was too deep, too distorted, as if the very air itself was speaking. Before I could react, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was him, the creature from the woods, the twisted figure I had seen before. But this time, it was different. His body was now contorted, stretching unnaturally, his limbs too long and too thin. His face was a mask of nightmares, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark, the skin on his face stretched tight, and his mouth, too wide, twisted into a grotesque grin. The creature took a step toward me, and with it, the air around me grew colder still. It wasn't just one creature. It was the thing that haunted this place. It was the Skinwalker. The creature's eyes glowed, an eerie, unnatural light that pierced the darkness like twin lanterns in a storm. My body froze, rooted to the spot. The air was thick with an overwhelming sense of dread, and my heart hammered against my chest, each beat echoing in my skull. The creature's twisted smile widened, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth that didn't belong to any animal or human on Earth. I stumbled backward, my legs shaking, but I couldn't look away. It wasn't just a creature, it was something older, something driven by an ancient hunger. The figure lurched forward, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. "You shouldn't have come here," the creature whispered again, its voice deeper than before, more guttural, as if the very land itself was speaking through it. I didn't wait for it to speak again. My instincts took over. I turned and ran. Every step felt like an eternity as I pushed myself deeper into the forest, my breath ragged, my mind scrambling for a way out. The woods were no longer the same. The trees loomed taller, their twisted limbs reaching out like claws, as if the forest itself was alive, moving, bending to the will of the creature hunting me. I heard it behind me, the footsteps, slow and methodical, echoing in the stillness of the night. The creature wasn't in a hurry. It didn't need to be. It knew that I couldn't outrun it. The fear was suffocating. It was everywhere, wrapping around me like a thick fog, pressing in on me from all sides. My eyes darted frantically, searching for any sign of escape, but there was nothing. The woods stretched endlessly in every direction, a labyrinth designed to keep you lost forever. And then, I heard it, a howl, a deep, primal cry that echoed through the trees, sending a chill down my spine. It was a sound I recognized now, a sound that didn't belong to any animal I had ever heard before. The Skinwalker was calling to something else. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let whatever was out there join the hunt. I forced my legs to move faster, pushing through the thick underbrush, branches slapping at my face, tearing at my clothes. My lungs burned, but I didn't dare stop. The howl sounded again, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of more footsteps. It was no longer just one thing. The Skinwalker had many faces. I could hear them all now, the low growls, the whispers, the creaking of bones moving unnaturally. The forest seemed to pulse with life, with darkness. I wasn't just running from one creature. I was running from something that could change shape, something that could become anyone or anything. I had to get back to the town, the safety of the motel. There had to be a way out. As I pushed through the trees, I stumbled into the clearing again, But this time, it was different. The stone monument was now surrounded by figures, twisted, hunched shapes, each more grotesque than the last. They weren't human anymore. They were something else entirely. Something old, something wrong. And they were all watching me. I backed away slowly, my heart in my throat, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and run. But I had no more strength. My body was giving out. I couldn't keep going. And then, I saw it. A figure standing just beyond the clearing, just inside the edge of the trees. It was a person. A man. He stepped forward, and a shiver ran down my spine as I recognized him. It was the old man from the motel. But his face wasn't the same. His eyes were wide and hollow, and his skin was stretched taut over his skull, like it was barely clinging to his bones. His mouth hung open, twisted into a grin that made my stomach churn. "No," I gasped, my breath catching in my throat. You're one of them." The man, if that's what he was, nodded slowly. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice rasping, like gravel scraping against metal. "The Skinwalker doesn't kill, it replaces." A terrible understanding washed over me, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The old man wasn't just a town resident, he had been the Skinwalker all along, or had become one, just like all the others in the woods. They didn't die, they didn't age, they took new forms, wore new faces, and lived on, hidden in plain sight. I turned to run again, but the shadows around me shifted, moving too quickly, blocking my path. The figures from the clearing closed in. I was surrounded. I had only one chance. I grabbed a jagged stone from the ground and swung it toward the nearest figure, hitting it square in the face. It screamed, a high-pitched, inhuman sound, and staggered back, but the others kept coming. I sprinted again, but this time, I didn't look back. My legs were like lead, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't know how much longer I could keep going. And then, finally, I saw the town in the distance, the lights of the motel, flickering weakly against the black sky. I pushed myself harder, faster, as the sounds of the creatures, the Skinwalkers, faded into the background. I didn't stop until I reached the door of the motel. I slammed it shut behind me and locked it, my hands shaking uncontrollably. But I knew, deep in my bones, that it wasn't over. The Skinwalker had found me, but it had also given me a gift, a new face. I could feel it now, crawling beneath my skin, whispering its hunger into my mind. I'm not sure how much time has passed since that night. Days? Weeks? I don't know. But one thing is certain, I'm not alone. The thing that lives inside me is watching, waiting, and it's only a matter of time before it takes over completely. I can feel its eyes on me now, its smile stretching across my face. I can hear it whispering to me, it's time to find someone new. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts on this terrifying story, and subscribe for more spine-chilling horror tales.